Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Brian from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everyone? Good afternoon. I'm Brian with the Security Squawk podcast here with Andre and Randy. What's up, guys? How are you today?
Doing well.
I'm buckled in, ready to go, man.
Buckle up. Here we go. So we got a pretty good show on tap today, everybody. We got some new information regarding what the Black Basta ransomware group is up to and how they're using brute force to attack your edge devices. So we'll clue you in on what that means and what you need to do to protect yourself. We're also going to cover Atchison County dealing with a cyber attack, leaving their offices, government offices, closed. We also have a segment in our following up related to government hacks and cyber attacks, where the Cleveland Municipal Court, we have more information 3 weeks after their cyber attack event occurred. And we're going to dive into a story that we found on KnowBe4, where a report that they released finds that the education sector is unprepared for escalating cyber attacks. And there's a story out there today, guys, that we're going to cover on top of that probably provides even more supporting information for what KnowBe4 found in their report. And that's a report out of Bitdefender that says February was the worst month on record for ransomware attacks. And one threat group had a field day. So we'll dive into who that was and what they did. Microsoft365 attacks can bypass your email security now. So we'll fill you in on that and why the FBI is warning Gmail, Outlook, and VPN users that you need to act now. So without further ado, guys, let's get into it and talk about the Black Basta brute force tool that they developed, used to attack your edge devices. So we'll explain what an edge device is, and we'll let you know how Black Basta is using this to their advantage to get into your network and then attack you with ransomware. But before we do, please remember that there's a fee for this show that we do, and we provide you with insight and content unparalleled on the internet when it comes to conversations like this. So in return for that, and the fact that we don't bore you with commercials and annoy you with things, we just give you the goods, and it's end-to-end listening, usually from 45 minutes to an hour of our time. And we spend plenty of time putting together the show for you. So in return for that, we just ask that you share the show. Like, subscribe, comment where you can. We're on the YouTubes, we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and every audio podcasting platform out there on the internet. You can find us. So anything that you can do on those platforms to kind of give us a nod helps other people find this content. And your vote tells them, hey, this is a worthwhile podcast for you to pay attention to. So guys, without further ado, as I already said, let's get into it. Randy. Andre says he's going to need some help with this one, so
No.
We're going to need you to help him out here.
I'll
take it, guys. They came up with a tool that is now known. It's calling a brute force framework, right? Wow, right. So now we have the bad guys developing frameworks for how they're going to attack your company, right?
Yeah. So most likely they probably used AI to put this together. It is pretty smart in that it goes and it looks for the edge device. What is that? It's like a firewall. The word edge means it's like a separation between your network.
Well, it could be anything that's touching the internet.
Yeah,
right?
and basically
you could literally have a computer exposed to the internet, and by default, that's an edge device, right?
Yeah, technically, yeah. So they're going out and they're basically scanning, getting IP addresses from edge devices, but they're also, here's the one that's kind of ingenious, although it's ingenious in its simplicity, pulling out the certificates, which is that's a way that devices communicate with each other and kind of verify who they are. It's kind of like their driver's license, and it's basically pulling their ID, if you will, pulling that certificate. They're getting the information off the certificate that helps them understand what kind of device it is, and then they're using that information, the IP address, the ID info, if you will, from the certificate, and then they're saying, oh, based on these two pieces of information, most likely your login is admin or admin password 123. They're taking advantage of a lot of people out there that aren't changing the passwords of these kind of devices, and they're just rolling out basically the base password. And then they're probably also getting passwords that have been leaked and trying those as well, based on that information. So they're taking information that's been there all along and using it to basically better guess access to VPNs, firewalls, and other edge devices.
And the simplest thing that can stop this is two-form factor authentication, because even if they get your password, they still have to go through that extra step. And one thing that it mentioned, as you said, Randy, is that it's using already, passwords that they have, and they're doing what they call brute scale attacks. So they're doing thousands and thousands of logins per second. So all of this can really be stopped if someone is actually monitoring the systems that alerts them to say, hey, normally, you're only having 20 logins and all of a sudden, or attempts, and all of a sudden you have 20,000. So this is why it's so important to have good cyber hygiene and be monitoring these things.
Yes, and on a lot of these devices, you can actually turn off logging in from the internet. So yes, if they were inside your network, they could do the same thing, but they would have to be inside your network. On a lot of these devices, you can just turn off the whole web interface, which, there's a reason that they have that. There's a lot of, I guess, makes it easier sometimes to do some things, but maybe that shouldn't be on. Maybe shouldn't have that whole web interface on if you can turn it off. Because that's literally what they're doing. They see a web interface with a login. They get the ID, which is the certificate. They get that certificate, the IP address. Their AI tells them, hey, try all these passwords, and boom. So I guess if they don't have access to it, they wouldn't be able to try the passwords.
Yeah, and it's interesting how this all happened. Their chat log was leaked, and if I'm reading the article correctly, it seems that they were trying to go after a Russian bank, and this was some type of retaliation where this data was leaked.
Yeah, the other interesting thing is not only are they automating the part where they actually, try to break in, using brute force, but just finding these devices on the internet. Shutdown is a great tool. We've mentioned it on the show a million times. But Shutdown, doesn't find everything that's out there. And there's, different reasons for that, that we don't really need to go into on this show. But at the end of the day, they are using the tool to get that initial access, which you need. And you got to find the device first, right? Before you can start banging away and using, different password combinations, username and password combinations. And sometimes they're easy to find, and sometimes they're not so easy to find. They're hidden behind different ports and different things. And they've taken this tool and they've built it so it can go find this stuff really easy by using common things when IT administrators set things up, when they tend to set up things like, to make it easy for users, things like VPNs. They set up remote.domain.com, right? And that's what this tool has also automated for this threat group, is finding these devices by running through kind of like the common things that we know IT administrators like to do and like to set up when they create things like VPN addresses and stuff like that, right? vpn.company.com.
Yep.
Right. I'm sure your company's VPN is probably something like that. But on top of that, they've also built a mechanism for searching just IP addresses, right? So you don't even need a domain a lot of times. They're just doing things based on the IP address. So they've built a really robust tool here for exploiting what they're going to exploit. And then it's going to show on my screen because it's the only place I have the article up. But guys, if we look at, I thought I saw a chart here. Maybe I was wrong.
While you're looking for that, Brian, they're also pulling the name of the organization off of the certificate.
Yeah.
And then they're collating that with previously leaked known passwords. And then trying to use those to log into those devices as well.
Yeah, I thought they had a chart here of all this stuff that there was like 6 or 7 or 8 things that this tool looked for in terms of technologies behind once they find something, like what they're looking for, right? You know, whether it's a firewall, whether it's a Citrix server, whether it's an RDP server, Windows-based server with RDP turned on. They're looking to exploit all these different ones, but there's 6 that they're exploiting at a very high rate at this point. And it's why we're trying to bring this to people's attention, because it's happening, right? It's something that's being actively exploited, and it's only going to increase because they have this tool, right? This all had to be done manually before this, right? You're in a way, these ransomware groups, guys, and I might be one of the first people to say this, in a way, you know, we talk about AI and replacing jobs. They're literally using these tools to replace initial access brokers. These are the people that they usually pay, you know, a pretty good chunk of change. Like sometimes I've heard 70% of the ransom payment goes to the initial access broker. That's the people that actually break in and get access to the network so the ransomware group can deploy their ransomware. Right? It's 2 different entities. They work together in tandem to do this to your business, right? And this is a situation where they could be creating tools and automation to remove humans from that layer of the equation, which is more money for them. So they're financially motivated to knock that layer out of their business and control it more, which this tool is probably one of the first ones we've seen that's successfully done it to this level.
Crazy thing is it's been running behind the scenes for probably 1.5 years, 2 years, and we didn't know about it, according to this article.
Correct. and again, this isn't the only tool that is going to. This isn't the only tool that's going to. This is the only vulnerability the tool's going to go after, the ones that they're going after now. They're going to continually add to vulnerabilities as they figure out, hey, this is a worthwhile vulnerability to put into our tool set because it's something that we're finding is widespread. So this tool doesn't really have much success if companies could actually keep up with patching and, you know, actually, you know, not running these vulnerable edge devices. That's kind of the moral of the story, right? You can have 2-factor, right? But if you can exploit something, you might not even need credentials to get in, right? Because the vulnerability might allow them just to walk right in the front door without authentication, depending on what it is.
That's a lot more widespread than we know. I just talked to a friend just yesterday involved in helping out a company get unransomwared. And their routers or their firewalls that the company has were like those blue Linksys routers from like 2005 that were so popular back then. So they're like literally 20-year-old firewalls that they have.
Yeah.
So, you know, that could easily have been the way that they got into the network. I just think it's a lot more widespread than anybody wants to admit, except for us.
We will learn. We will learn. Andre, all good?
All good.
All right. Atchison County, guys, in Kansas has been closed since Monday, March 17th. Will remain closed today, March 18th, due to a cybersecurity attack. The attack impacted the county's computer network, prompting officials to take precautions to secure and restore services safely. Emergency services such as 911 are not affected by the attack. The county is working with third-party cybersecurity experts to investigate and mitigate the incidents. They're saying that the offices are closed as a precautionary measure to ensure the security of county systems. And it's impacting non-emergency services, but emergency services like 911 will be able to remain operational. And despite the closure, Atchison County Commission will hold an in-person meeting on Tuesday. So we have any more information other than that, guys, or it's probably too soon to tell, just kind of highlighting the fact that yet another municipal government has fallen victim to a ransomware group.
Yeah, no other information, just another government. And the fact that they're delaying it till today, I have a feeling next week we're going to be talking about how they've been down for the whole week.
Right. And then as we, we've seen so many of these attacks over time. The more than likely data has been breached. Theft of sensitive information has occurred. To what extent is really what we look for in the next coming days and weeks. Typically, you can see everything from the employees of the county's information being stolen all the way to criminal and legal records and court records. It just depends on how intertwined and how big this network is on kind of like that flat level we talked about, right? We've seen counties, we've seen states, the Indian reservation, that just went down, right? Not only did their government go down, but so did the casinos that they operate went down, right? So these networks can be very connected, even though at the end of the day, they probably shouldn't, right? The people that run your office at your local county or your local municipality, the people that work in the office, don't need to be on the same network as the police department, right? And sometimes we see those kinds of things going on.
I'm looking at their Facebook page announcement,
right?
And it says they've brought in nationally recognized third-party cybersecurity and data forensics consultants. Even without even getting into a ransom or what a ransom would cost them, obviously by bringing in these consultants, they're really going to start shelling out the big bucks to figure out what's going on, how to get to the bottom of this. And my point is, it's a lot cheaper to try to do the stuff up front, prevent the attack, or if it happens, limit the blast radius. You don't have to bring in a national expert and just recover and move on instead of having to shut everything down. It's not 100% preventable, but a lot of times, like I said, 99% of the times it is, right? So
KnowBe4, popular security and awareness training software, has issued a report titled "From Primary Schools to Universities, the Global Education Sector is Unprepared for Escalating Cyber Attacks." And this report highlights the significant vulnerabilities in the education sector's cybersecurity posture. And here are some of the key findings, guys. The education sector was the most targeted industry for cyber attacks in 2024. That comes from Checkpoint Research. So it looks like KnowBe4 went around to a bunch of other different data sets to put this report together. It's not their own information. Educational institutions heavily rely on third-party vendors for services like software as a service, cloud storage, and IT services. And this reliance poses a significant risk as vulnerabilities or breaches on those systems can affect multiple institutions, as we saw with power schools, right? Combination of modern and legacy IT systems in the educational setting, often due to limited resources and budgets, and rapid modernization demands, meaning the technology is moving too fast for what these schools can do and afford. This potentially or does leave sensitive data on outdated systems vulnerable to exploitation. As part of Verizon's 2024 data breach investigation report, guys, it noted that 17% of all security incidents targeted the education sector, with 14% resulting in confirmed data disclosures. In 2023, TrustWave reported 352 ransomware claims against educational institutions, and phishing being the most common method of initial breach. So obviously, I figured the report would go in this direction with security and awareness training. Security and awareness training significantly reduces human risk in schools. Employees' susceptibility to phishing attacks decreased from 33.4% to just 3.9% in small institutions after implementing sustained training. So let's talk about this, guys. According to KnowBe4, the education sector just needs to train their staff and things will get a lot better. Do you agree with that?
I think that's important because, you can have employees or students get tricked into a phishing email. But at the same time, as it was mentioned, there's legacy systems that the schools may not be able to retire yet. Or they just the IT department may be overwhelmed to keep up with things. So it's a combination, but definitely training is the most important thing. But we know our US educational system, and if we're giving our teachers one more thing to do, it's going to be really hard for them.
Yeah, and I would agree with that as well, Brian, and just say training's not going to be the silver bullet, but like the article says, huge percentage of the attacks started off because of a phishing attack, which means a user got an email and clicked on a bad link. And if they could be trained to where they don't click on the bad link, and instead of just, not seeing what's up, they figure out that it's a phishing email, delete it and ignore it, then the number of attacks could possibly go down. That wouldn't be the answer. So that's what I think what Andre's saying as well. So do we need training? Yes. Is it one of the simplest things to do? Yes. I think training and patching are two of the things you could add on with least amount of pain and just start doing it. Is it going to be the silver bullet? No. It's going to fix everything? No. Do we need more? Yes, we do.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if you're a hacker, you're looking at schools. What other industry can you get, student records, social security numbers, financial aid information, medical data? Like, you can use this information in all aspects. And the beauty of it is these kids or students may not even realize it for years and years and years, or you may have even like we've seen with retired teachers, where maybe they're now in the elderly stages, but then the school still has their information from 20 years ago, and you can just use it because nobody's going to notice.
Yeah, I think one of the things that schools could look at really that, might cost a little bit may cost a little bit up front, right? You may have to dedicate some resources, bring in a team to do a project around, network segmentation. But I think, network segmentation is one of those things that could really, it can save your school from needing to shut down if they can only get to certain systems. Like, they can get cyber attackers can get to too many systems on school networks right now, right? So if we invest some time, money, and resources into just planning out the networks a little bit better so they're segmented, I think we can, as Randy said, reduce the blast radius significantly. And I look at this as an investment long term that kind of pays itself back year over year, right? Because you're going to spend money on a one-time project for some engineer to come in and orchestrate what needs to be done on your network so you can limit the blast radius. But at the end of the day, I think it's a really smart investment that will pay dividends over the next potentially 10 years if you're not upgrading your network, all the time, right? I know schools that are running on the same network for the last 20 years, right? So if this is something you set up 20 years ago, this would be paying dividends over and over because you have this kind of layer of protection in place that you spent money on early on, and you really don't have to, other than some maintaining, as long as nobody goes in and messes with what was set up, that's going to continue to run that way until it doesn't, until you decide to make a change. So I think segmentation and paying an expert to come in and breaking up your network in certain ways so they can only get to certain machines. And you do have to have the discipline. And it is a cultural shift mentally that, yeah, not every system is going to be able to access every system, right? The computers that are storing or have access to the student information, the student school records, the behavioral records, the health records, they should be on like one or two computers that only limited people have access to, and they're on a completely separate network than everything else. Like, that is how you do it the right way, right? You identify, Randy mentioned that a couple of weeks ago on the show. Step one, identify. You identify, the data, how sensitive it is, and then you limit the people and systems who have access to that data, right? You don't give all the computers in the student computer lab access to, on the same network as these computers. But I guarantee you, in probably more than 80% of the schools across the country, that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's just a username and password away from some kid getting in and being able to change his report card.
Yep.
I remember I used to do work for a company that did editing for like Sony Corp, the filmmaker.
Yep.
And I remember their rule was that it was only that video was only able to be edited on that one computer, and there was so many different rules. So I don't know obviously the cloud changed, and now, back in the days, for example, you could make a rule that says this computer can only run this software. Like now with everything, you can kind of just go from computer to computer within an organization and just continue working. So I know it's efficient, but we used to have a lot more restrictions back then.
100%. I mean, it's one of those things where security does bring in these things, but it's more, in my opinion, it's more a mental hang up with a human being just not willing to give up certain, whether you want to, a lot of times, guys, like I talk to people, right? And it's like, oh, and then we won't be able to do that. Well, how important really is that to your business? Like, do you really need to access every single printer in your network? You know what I mean? Like, you don't, like, your computer might need to be segmented off if you're the CEO, and then you get access to like one or two printers, not every single printer. But these are like some of the challenges you deal with when you're talking to CEOs and executives, when you tell them like, okay, we have to do these types of things, and like trivial things like that really do become an issue in this stuff getting implemented. Like, oh my God, what do you mean I won't be able to like access this person's computer from my computer anymore, or this file or that server or whatever, right? Some piece of technology is no longer accessible from your phone or your computer, and that becomes this big hang up as to why we're not going to do cybersecurity the way that we should. And that shouldn't be, right? And that's where the culture in an organization needs to change, right? Because if we don't change, then this trend that's come out by, I believe, Bitdefender, but security experts in this article, February 2025 was the worst month on record for ransomware attacks, and one threat group particularly had a field day. And quite frankly, doing the show for the last 2 months, the first 2 months of the year, I don't really remember talking about this group. I do remember talking about this group in December, saying that there could be a potential comeback for this group, along with Lockbit. But it was really Medusa. I think we mentioned Ghost Ransomware Group a couple times, but now we have Clop, who apparently did some damage in February, guys. First off, just to throw you some stats, February 25 saw a record 962 claimed ransomware victims, which is a 120% increase from February of last year, 2024, when there were only 425 victims. So do the math. 30 days in a month, and there's only 28 in February. So there you go. And almost 1,000 victims. If businesses, I remember, guys, when we first got into doing cybersecurity, and the whole thing was, it's not a matter of if, but when, right? This thing is like the chances of you getting hit today are pretty damn good. And the way it's like, I hate that term because it's so cliche, but my God, like every year it gets more true.
Yeah.
Clop ransomware dominance. Clop ransomware group was responsible for 335 of those attacks, marking a 300% increase from the prior month. And we talked about them in December, saying they were making a comeback. Go back and look at our show from December. I don't know which one it was, but we talked about it.
The crazy thing, Brian, is where they're making their inroads still are around that
Clio.
The Clio, I mean.
Yep.
What is it like? Doesn't Clio own Move It? The whole
No, they're just the same type of file transfer software.
Okay, so same type of thing, but just the fact that they're still honing in on that, and it's a vulnerability that we've known about, that's been out there, been talked about, and they're just really cashing in on a couple of vulnerabilities related.
As we mentioned, this is no different than the edge device story that we covered earlier, right? This is an edge device. It's a Clio system. It's out on the internet. It's exposed in the internet because of how it functions and how businesses use it and need to move data between one entity from another. And this is one of those vulnerabilities that they don't need a username and password. If that device is out there on the internet, they can just use the vulnerability and attack them to execute what's known as a remote command exploit. And if your system's unpatched, they don't need a username and password to run this. And they have full control of the system once they do this, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's patches have been out for these systems for well over 6 months for the Clio vulnerabilities, which are both rated. There's 2 of them, and one's a 9.8, the other one's a 10 out of 10 in severity. The attack process involves initial automated scanning phase to gain access. That's what we talked about with the automated scanning software. And then followed by a manual phase where attackers, move laterally, escalate privileges, and then deploy the ransomware, which we talk about all the time on the show on how they actually do this stuff. Usually it's weeks or months later from that initial access. So what can organizations do, guys, to kind of deal with this? I mean, we kind of already talked about making sure you have people patching your systems in a timely manner, because that's a huge way. What are other things that companies can do to help them detect ransomware at an early stage? Randy, kind of keep going along with the theme of what you said of reducing the blast radius. What are some technologies? What are some maybe buzzwords or products that business owners should know about and be thinking about implementing to combat these threats?
I mean, most of your EDRs or your managed EDRs,
which is
it's endpoint detection and response. It's kind of like 2025's answer to antivirus, but most of those can see telemetry on the workstation. Like, let's talk about like maybe Signal One can see the telemetry on the workstation. They can see when some of this stuff is going on. This is a product that you could add, not cheap, but not that expensive. And it's a lot cheaper than coming back from a ransomware attack. That's for sure. I'd say that, and then also just, our word. I think it wasn't our word a couple weeks ago. Telemetry, wasn't that a word we used a bunch?
There's one you used a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
You
and
came back from that dumb conference.
it really boils down to that. Well, yeah, that's right. Now I've been using that word at the conference, but it really boils down to that because recently we had somebody fall for a phishing where they tried to log into a fake 365. Bad guys were able to get into that person, into the 365. They created a rule. The bad guys created a rule. We detected it. And then through telemetry, which is being able to see everything in their 365, everything on their workstation, everything in their network, all in one place, we saw that that's all that happened. We caught it quick. We locked everybody out, reset everything, got the good guy back in, bad guys locked out, and everything went on. So having telemetry is a big deal because it helps you recover from attack faster. With more security.
I've been watching boxing a lot, and there's also a book called Jab, 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 Right Hook. So I'm thinking boxing. Jab is the phishing email.
Wait. That's a Gary V marketing book.
It is, but it's still boxing.
It's not a boxing book.
No, it's not. No. It's not a boxing book. But the analogy is how the bad guys, they're gonna get you. They're gonna try the phishing emails. They're gonna try the 0-day exploits. They're gonna try some type of intrusion, but they're always just basically hitting you, just trying to knock you out. So protect yourselves. Put on a helmet. For Pete's sake.
Yeah, I guess one of the things you mentioned, EDR, right? EDR, kind of protects the endpoint just so people kind of understand this stuff. There's another thing that kind of goes above and beyond EDR, which is XDR, which kind of uses different technologies to kind of figure out what's going on your network as well as your endpoint. And then you really want to back that up, in my opinion, guys, with a SOC, right? Mm-hmm. You can run these tools with or without a SOC, meaning you can run them and they can alert the user on the computer with a little pop-up, and it's as simple as that. Or you can configure these tools to alert a IT person at your company. Or even better, you can send all the stuff that's happening in these EDR products, EDRs and XDRs, all the security events that are occurring. You can ship them off to what's known as a SOC, a Security Operations Center, which ingests that information 24/7. As long as you're sending it to them, they're ingesting it and then they're evaluating it. Right, and those are the human beings, and they use automated technology as well. So you see, like, the ransomware groups are using automated technology, so your business needs to defend itself with automated technology, or you're really not giving yourself a fighting chance.
Right.
So SOCs are important because they can act quickly. They can detect things very quickly, and if you have, things set up with your SOC where they can respond to, then the response becomes almost immediate, right? So 1 o'clock in the morning, you get hit with ransomware, somebody logs into your M365 account, starts encrypting all your OneDrive files or your SharePoint files. Who's going to detect that at 1 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, right? This is where it's a really good idea to look at a SOC and put a Security Operations Center team in place. I think, at this point in time, in 2025, it's fairly cheap for a business to acquire a SOC, but you can't just put a SOC in without the other tools that the SOC needs to run. Otherwise, they're really not, ingesting anything, right? So you need the EDR. You need to invest in these other tools that we mentioned, and you layer in a SOC to kind of beef up that level of security. All right, guys. So we got this news story too. And as Randy said in the green room, it seems like this story is like in the news every other week, right? And he's not wrong. FBI gives a lot of warnings out. CISA gives a lot of warnings out. DHS gives a lot of warnings out around all things cybersecurity. But this one struck our eye because, it was a little interesting because it covered quite a few different areas that I think a lot of businesses use today. So the FBI, in collaboration with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, otherwise known as CISA, issued a warning to the users of Gmail, Outlook, and VPNs regarding Medusa ransomware. Medusa is a ransomware as a service that has been active since June of 2021. You don't hear too many ransomware groups sticking around for 4 years under the same name.
Under the same brand.
Yeah, it's known for double extortion tactics where attackers encrypt the victim's data, threaten to publicly disclose the stolen information unless the business or organization pays a ransom. Medusa likes to hit various sectors, including healthcare, education, legal, insurance, technology, and manufacturing. They've hit over 300 companies in their time that we know of. I'm sure there's a lot more that we don't know about. They primarily use phishing as their exploit and as their initial access, and then they exploit unpatched. They enlist initial access brokers, as I talked about earlier, to assist in the initial network breaches, and then they swoop in as that ransomware as a service to deploy the ransomware. The group, cybersecurity experts that have negotiated with this group have seen ransom demands range from anywhere from $100,000 to $15 million. Victims can pay $10,000 in cryptocurrency to extend the countdown timer on the data released by 1 day. It's actually something I kind of forgot about, that they started doing this, and a couple other guys started doing this, where if you want to buy more time, you can. And so, like, the countdown timer is 48 hours, and if you want 24 hours, you got to pay them 10 grand while you're sitting there mulling it over with your breach coach. So the FBI and CISA recommend UFA, as Randy or Andre already recommended, and for all critical accounts, including your webmail and VPN. Users should also keep their software up to date, use strong passwords, and monitor their network activity for suspicious behavior. And as I said in the last segment, the only way you're going to do that is with an XDR SOC team behind it. Ooh, that's a lot of.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't realize that was turned on.
What are you playing? Casino Royale?
No, that's a dial tone. That's a dial tone on my.
You just hit the jackpot. You got to share that with me, since you won.
I've been over here playing Wheel of Fortune online. I just hit the jackpot.
All right, so that's what the FBI is saying, guys. Enable the 2FA, keep your software updated, use strong passwords. So anything that caught your eye here with this story other than what I already covered?
I mean, good that they're saying this, but it's literally the same thing over and over and over and over and over. Like, if you can, have a good password. If you can, have multi-factor turned on. I mean, there's really nothing new in this other than the fact that we're still dealing with it in 2025. And I was surprised because was just talking to a user. I did a lunch and learn last week, was talking after the lunch and learn, they had created a Gmail address, and they had just done it like in the last few days. And they said that it suggested multi-factor, but didn't require it. And I'm surprised that they're not, and that could be false information. Maybe they misunderstood, but I'm surprised that they wouldn't be requiring it for brand new users. Why not? I guess they're thinking that it's going to make their support tickets go way up if they have multi-factor turned on. I don't know.
So, let me take a different kind of like angle to what we're talking about here, right?
Good.
I've mentioned like EDR. We mentioned EDR, XDR, and how a SOC comes into play, right? And what businesses need to understand is, like, there's things that happen before you actually get hit with ransomware. And if we detect these things on the tools that we have in our companies, guys, we're going to jump on that and deal with it. And a lot of times we have enough technology in place where it's literally just kind of a click of a mouse to isolate the system. And that threat actor who is trying to take advantage of whatever they're taking advantage of can no longer do anything because he's now been kicked out of the system. right? So like here's what kind of my point, right, is so there's a bunch of things that they do in terms of what we call indicators of compromise, right? But here's one thing I can tell you. If you try to do something like I'm about to say on any of the systems in our environment or the ones that we support who subscribe to a SOC service, well, there's going to be action taken or something is not even going to be allowed to happen because of what we have in place, right? And one of the very first things that this organization or this Medusa ransomware group does is they utilize remote access tools, legitimate ones like AnyDesk, Atera, ConnectWise Screen Connect, RDP, and PX Exec for lateral movement. So they have to get these installed on your network, right, or on a computer in your system. What I can say is, like, for a lot of the systems we manage in our own systems here at Exact, if you even try to install this kind of stuff on a system, it's going to get denied, like almost automatically, right? And then somebody's going to get alerted that somebody tried to install this, and we're going to look into it deeper. Did you download this off the internet and try to install it, or did somebody do we have an attacker on the network who's trying to install it? You catch it there at that stage, it's done. It's over, right? No ransomware gets deployed. Then they use legitimate tools like advanced IP scanner or soft perfect network scanner for network enumeration. So that's a tool that they use. And a lot of IT companies use this tool. It's freely available to download off the internet, both of them, and run them on systems. And I don't know about advanced IP scanner, but I know soft perfect network scanner can be run under the user account and doesn't need admin privileges to install or run. So if you think like I'm just not going to have any, I'm just going to take away all admin rights and nobody can install anything, well, you can install something like this, right? But again, an EDR product backed by a SOC configured properly will detect when somebody is installing and or running one of those tools like that. Right there is another kind of tripwire where they're going to fall over it and your team's going to come in and stop the threat. They're not still going to be able to deploy ransomware. The next thing they do is use PowerShell and Windows command prompts, and they're used for system network reconnaissance. We don't allow PowerShell or Windows command prompt to be run on systems that we manage. You need somebody to go in and say, okay, allow them to run this. So by default, we disable that on systems, and that can be done. And if somebody tries to run it, again, the SOC team's going to get alerted. They're going to call the person. What did you try to do here? What happened here? Get some information, investigate the signal, and write a report as to what happened. So I'm just looking at other things that they do, kind of basic stuff that's more advanced, but really that's, if you don't catch them in those 3 steps, right, with the remote access software, with the network scanner or the PowerShell run, they're going to eventually get to the point where they could run and deploy the ransomware at that point, right? But you have 3 chances to nail them before they can do what they're trying to do, right? And you guys know what I'm talking about, so you guys can kind of agree with me that like those are 3 pretty big, deal moves when you're talking about somebody doing something on a computer, right? Your average user isn't running PowerShell and Windows command prompt, right? That's usually an IT person, IT administrator who's running those tools, right? If you don't have something that's alerting you that somebody's trying to fire that up, then you're just asking to get hacked, right? You're asking to be the when in the not if but when.
Yeah, I just, for example, we use a password manager, and I've subscribed to my alerts for our company. So anytime an alert comes, it goes to a mailbox. And someone for the first time one of our clients used the password manager, logged in on a device that's not normal, and we got an alert for it. And same thing, like you said, we're watching it. Okay, does the IP address or host name match? And if it doesn't, we give a call. Or so there's so much inexpensive, as Randy says, compared to millions of paying for a ransomware, but there's so much inexpensive stuff. And yes, the FBI is like it seems like it's a repeat article, but it's like they're telling us the same things as far as what 2-3 years ago, the solutions of what we consumers should be doing is pretty much the same.
Right. It's just nobody sees the value in investing in these tools because they don't see the perspective I just laid out. Probably most business owners never had laid out for them. Like, here are 3 opportunities for us to stop this before it becomes ransomware, but you have to have this technology in place in order to catch it. Right. I think SOC and things like that are sold probably more to bigger companies in the first place, which I think all small businesses should have a SOC behind their business. Things are scaled down enough and commoditized enough where I think most businesses can afford these types of things today, right? It's just whether you see the value in having that in place and what is it actually doing for you. Because look, most months it's not going to do anything. And if you have enough protections in place, you should never have to use it.
Right.
But it's there when they get through and things happen, right?
And check this out. It says the user has sent a device approval request, review login request to allow the member to finish logging in. So we're not even allowing them to use this new device or unknown device.
Yeah, and that's a rule you can set up. That's not something that's set in stone, right? You could have that client set up that way, and you could have another client where maybe they don't want to be turned off like that, right? So
you can have misconfigurations. We're doing that cybersecurity risk assessment for a client that's they're not using us for their everyday IT, and they have a very well-known, respectable zero trust software, but we were able to install Dropbox, TeamViewer, and I believe Dropbox, TeamViewer, and AnyDesk with no problems. So a lot of things are misconfigured, or what I don't know their reasoning, but
hey, I kind of said it earlier. It's sometimes you got to set the ego aside with this stuff and understand that, like, you wanting to add a device whenever you want to your M365 is maybe it's not a good idea, because if you can add it without anybody approving it, so can a hacker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the story. So, all right, guys, last article for the show, last segment for the show is an update, a following up segment on the Cleveland Municipal Court, and they recently reopened after a significant cyber attack forced it to close for about 3 weeks. The court reopened to the public on March 12th, so about a week ago, with cases previously scheduled for that day being heard in the general division. The cyber attack, which occurred on February 23rd, resulted in the suspension of most court operations except for arraignments for individuals in jail. The closure caused delays in background checks and rescheduling of cases. All criminal and civil cases set for hearings between the time that they were down were rescheduled for at least 30 days after the court reopened. And the investigation into the cyber incident is still ongoing, with officials remaining very tight-lipped about the details, including who was responsible and whether any data was compromised. The court is still in the process of updating its systems with new security features and passwords, indicating efforts to enhance cybersecurity. That scares me right there with that line. We can talk about that in a second. So the closure has caused significant inconvenience for individuals needing court services, including delays in resolving disputes and obtaining background checks. There have been calls for more transparency and regular updates from the court regarding the incident and its aftermath. So, very interesting that they're saying in the article here, guys, that the courts have reopened, but they're still they're not sure what happened, and they're in the process of updating their systems with new security features and passwords. But they're back up and running. That just kind of seems out of order to me.
Yeah, and that's why we're getting the calls for more transparency, because things don't add up 100%, and it's going to make people like us, at the minimum, like our ears are going to perk up and say, what did they just say? They need more transparency here to let people know what's going on. The employee that was interviewed in this article said they don't have access to the internet. They're not even able to get on the internet at this point. So they're not really back. They're more like they're doing
They're
it
up, but with no internet access. So they can probably access databases and local systems, stuff like that, and probably get some work done. And there's probably some systems that are connected to the internet, right? But the majority of them are not, which I guess I'm okay with a little bit. You know, if you're rebuilding systems or putting in new systems, and as you build the new network, you're putting those systems on the internet while keeping the old system off the internet, right? That could potentially be vulnerable still, or have backdoors put into it, or who knows what. Not a terrible strategy at the end of the day, but I believe it will be a slow and painful recovery if that's their process.
Yeah, I'm on their Facebook page. On March 3rd, they posted, and that was the last time. And people are like, hey, can I get this done? And nobody's commented or, no updates since then. So doesn't look like they had a plan. And their website is still down too.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how these, especially in Ohio, I mean, they just seem to like not know how to handle cyber attacks, especially from a government standpoint. But at the end of the day, the lack of transparency is very frustrating. With the fact that people are coming out being like, "Hey, we're back up and running," when you're clearly not. I don't know. I have issues with that. That's all.
I mean, obviously they're not, right?
No, they're clearly not. But they're sitting there saying, like, I guess they can have a judge sit there with a gavel and make decisions and bring in juries and stuff. I guess that's operational enough, right? Interesting. So it's interesting. I don't know why Ohio seems to have these issues.
Yeah.
It seems like we're always talking about towns in Ohio, like on a monthly basis.
It's because they have that really strict law. If you do cybercrime, you go to prison. Sorry.
We'll end on that one. Thanks for your input, guys. Good show. Remember, Security Squawk podcast, we bring this stuff to you for free. So we ask that you share this content, share the show, like and subscribe wherever you're consuming this content, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, or on your favorite podcasting platform. We appreciate the support, and we will see everyone next week. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.